Good evening. I'd like to welcome you to yet another edition of Talking with Colerain Township. I'm very fortunate to have with us at the round table tonight Administrator Jim Rowan. Glad you could join us.
Good evening.
We are a part of the fall, and that's the scary part. We were talking earlier, but of course, earlier we were also talking about being in camp, and that's usually a summer thing. And you and the administrative team had just recently come back from camp. Let's talk about that a little bit, of what that's going to mean to Township residents.
Absolutely. Well, our leadership team, half of us has gone through this, what we call Lean Ohio Boot Camp. And it's a program that is offered through Miami University in the state of Ohio. They offer scholarship programs to local government. So we were contacted about 3 months ago by a representative of Miami University asking if we would like to send a team up to participate in this Lean Ohio Boot Camp during the first full week of October. So myself and Public Safety Director Dan Malloy, Police Chief Mark Denny, and our Accounting and HR Director Emily Randolph all went up to Oxford and participated in this week-long Lean training. And in March, there will be another week offered in which I hope to send the remaining members of the leadership team, meaning Chief Denny, Tim Langer, Public Services Director, and Jenna LeCount, our new zoning administrator. Frank Cook, our fire chief, has already been through the training and participated with a number of Midwest fire chiefs.
Okay.
So it was a great opportunity for us to look at lean processes and identifying ways to be better efficient, keep our costs down, and try to manage our resources in a much more effective way.
And it sounds, from what I was doing some research on it, it sounded more like a real hands-on kind of idea where they're giving you practical ideas and you can take a look into that. Am I reading that correctly? And
absolutely. The course started with kind of an overview of what the lean process looks like from start to finish. And one of the first projects that we worked on was we took a simulation and we actually mapped it out with sticky notes on white paper just to kind of show all the various entry points, process points, decision-making points in an entire process from start to finish. And then through that 5-day program, for instance, one of the exercises we went through was trying to process a certain number of applications in a certain amount of time. And the goal was to do 16 applications in 6 minutes. And we did one application in 29 minutes to start the process. So through the week, what we actually did was we studied all the various points in the process and tried to streamline that to make it more efficient. By the time we restated that process on the 5th day of the workshop, we got that down to 79 seconds.
wow.
So the process just allows you to take any process, look at the various entry points, the number of touches we have, the number of decision points that are made, and look at where is your waste, where are your delays, and how do you apply a new process to create the greater efficiency and greater accountability for our public. So it was a great exercise for our team to go through, and of course immediately as you're going through this simulation, you're starting to think about projects within your own community that you can come back and actually apply this to.
And it's kind of interesting that I know this program has been going on for a while, but this is sounding like something that you've been wanting to implement since your start here, as a matter of fact. It mirrors very much what you've always been trying to do.
Yeah, it does, and I think, looking back at all the changes that we've made over the past 3.5 years, we've had to reduce staff, we've had to reduce processes. I really wish I would have had this training 3.5 years ago because it allows you to look at a process, identify the efficiencies or the lack of efficiencies, and come up with some better processes. And one case in point that I'll take a look at is our whole nuisance process. And that's the process in which a resident will complain about tall grass or litter or property maintenance or cracked sidewalks, falling down gutters, a number of type of nuisance property maintenance issues, and how we work that through a system. Mm-hmm. And historically that's been handled by our zoning department. And since I've been here, we're now on our fourth zoning administrator. And so you start to look at this and say, what's the problem? What's driving those administrators out? And I think we've come to realize that this whole nuisance process is so time consuming that it takes away from what's really needed to do long range planning, land use planning, mapping, and things of that nature. Mm-hmm. So prior to attending this training, we actually removed the nuisance process from the zoning department, put it in our public services department so that we could actually attack it from an abatement perspective. We hired a code enforcement officer through our police department this past year to do the enforcement piece. But it still lacked the process that we needed to make it efficient. And I think now that we've gone through this training, we came back this past week, we've actually mapped out what that process should look like, and now we're rolling that out so that we can hopefully create greater efficiency in that nuisance process.
Obviously, that's, you're looking at one piece, you're going to be looking at others. Nuisance is one. Are you looking at other areas? And of course, the next big question after that is, how embraced was this? Obviously, your first team went, and you're already starting the moving, so there was obviously some acceptance in the idea of making things move forward. Although, granted, your team has never said no to any of that. There's always been movement, and which is great. So, but taking these new pieces, where are we standing?
Yeah, well, I think the key is, the training right now has been done at the leadership level. And to make this process successful, you got to have the buy-in from your employees. And I think that's one of the areas that we've kind of struggled in, is when you make a lot of change, people are left out. They're left behind. They don't understand what the ultimate goal is. So this process is going to allow us to engage our stakeholders, our employees, in an end solution that hopefully will make their job better. This process is not intended to reduce staff or eliminate staff. It's intended to identify inefficiency in what you do so that we can create greater opportunity to better serve maybe in other areas. So, the first process obviously is the nuisance process. What we look at in this process is we look at our supplier, or the types of information that comes in, the inputs, the process, the outputs, and ultimately the customer. And one of the things that we realize is that our customer, meaning our residents, aren't happy with the response time and the process that we've put in place with regards to nuisance. So this process is going to create greater accountability. If a resident makes a complaint and they want to follow up 6 weeks later, we're going to be able to tell them in the process where it is. I think it's important to note that when a complaint comes in, it's not as simple as investigating, taking a picture, and taking care of the issue. Ohio law is very specific. It can take up to 90 days from the time the complaint is issued until the matter is resolved due to various timelines, notices, certified mail. There's a lot of things that have to happen for us to be able to go on private property and to abate a problem that occurs. So that's one process. Another process that we worked through this week is a simple telephone tree. Resident calls in trying to get to a particular department. We looked at that process. We don't have the luxury of having a person be able to answer every call. Correct. But we can minimize the number of times they have to hit that button. Sure. And so we worked this week to try to streamline that process. So we'll start to see some changes when people call in at the 385-7500 number. They'll have a menu of extensions. Hopefully it'll be really click one button and they'll have a person. Okay. And we've got a rollover process in place so that if the first person doesn't answer, it goes to somebody else, so that we're giving that attention to detail to our residents where possible. Bringing back, again, that human touch again.
There was that loss for a while, and you're right. I think the phone was one of those monstrous tasks, like, okay, I pitched that one, and where did I go here? And now you didn't exactly know where you were maybe sometimes, or you were waiting for a little bit longer. That's a really good one to tackle. I can see, again, because, as you said, your citizens are the end user of your product that you're creating.
Absolutely. And you mentioned other processes. We're going to, as we recognize processes that need to be looked at, whether it's from a purchasing process or a payroll process, one of the next processes I'm going to look into is how we manage the staffing to take care of our parks. And I'll give you an example. Okay. This year, in an effort to drive down our cost, we chose to not bring back a lot of our seasonal workers and just handle it with existing staff. And I think anybody that visited our parks this year would notice that they weren't as kept the way that we like to keep them. Sure. And to go back to our vision statement of delivering excellence to a best-in-class community, you can't go into the parks and see them in the condition we saw them this year and expect people to feel like they're part of a best-in-class community. So we're going to sit down with our parks department and our public roads, or our roads department, and we're going to look at this process, and we're going to engage those that are dealing with cutting and dealing with the ball fields and weed eating and everything it takes to maintain a park. And we're going to look at that process from start to finish. what's it take for us to be able to staff it adequately to provide for safety, security, and a cleanliness area for our community. And that's going to be one of the next steps that we're going to do as we implement the return of those seasonal workers next year, so that 2016 there will be a whole different look in our parks when our residents go and visit.
It almost sounds like you're taking a whole new approach to this as well, whereas you looked at the issue last year and going into 2015, and this is what you had, basically the cards that were dealt for you. Now you've got a different outlook on it. I think you're going into something different.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. I mean, I think sometimes we tend to react. You know, money's tight. The first thing you want to do is just reduce cost. And obviously we have to evaluate what that process is, look and see if there's ways that we can use our existing resources better, maybe not necessarily cut the bottom out of things, but maybe we can cut back a little bit and reallocate, repurpose our resources, whether it's supplies or people, to create that capacity that we need to be best in class. And that's just another example of something we're looking at next year, and just trying to find a way with the limited resources we have to deliver that excellence to our community.
It sounds that you're trying to utilize a lot of the information that you gathered from the public comments that were at the community center back early summer, where you had gathered a number of people, and it was the non-emergency services that you had spoke. It sounds like you're really trying to hit those first because, again, we saw a lot of people not in an uproar, but actually concerned.
Sure. Yeah, and you know, one of the overwhelming themes that came out of that was, you know, the condition of the parks, and there were a lot of opportunities, a lot of brainstorming that took place on ideas on what we could do going forward. And I think those ideas are great. I think we continue to explore volunteer opportunities where we can. At the same time, local government has a responsibility to provide a safe environment, and I'm not going to engage volunteers and put them on our equipment and create a liability for the township. So we need to find ways to better utilize our personnel and to get them out there and address those concerns. And I'm confident that this process is going to be a foundation for everything we do in the township as we look at processes to become, you know, more lean and look at opportunities to drive efficiency. That's what we're going to do.
Obviously, you know, you've had the one half of your staff go. You're looking at later. When both take it, when both sides take the camp, what do you expect in the end result on that? Because obviously you're seeing a lot of change.
Well, my expectation is, you know, this project is intended to work from the ground up. So it's not necessarily meant to be driven by the leadership. Our goal is to get the leaders trained and then for them to take it out to their teams and to look at opportunities. And there will be a project charter where any given person can submit a project charter to the leadership team and say, I'd like to do a process on this, XYZ. And they'll identify who the team members are and they'll bring them in. And it's really something that could take as much as a full week to study a process, depending on the length of that process. And there's opportunities that you don't have to just start from scratch and build all the way through. You can actually have a quick win and identify something real quickly. And that's kind of what we've done this week. Rather than chart it out totally from start to finish, we had some decent processes in place, but we took the model, we mapped where our current state is, and then we mapped where a future state might be, looked at that waste and tried to eliminate that. So I'm hoping it's something that we can actually accept as a culture, and that we take it all the way down to the troops in the field, so that if they see something that's working inefficiently, we want them to know that if you see something that's not working, submit the project charter, work it through the process, and let's get it right. We don't have all the answers. We think sometimes we do, but really it takes those that are in the field doing the job every day. Their buy-in, their understanding of the process is what's necessary for us to have a process that's really going to work.
You said that you're not looking for the quick win, obviously, and things are going to take some time. I would hope some things take some time. Obviously, you want to take a look into things. You've mentioned it could be a day, it could be a week. Is that the typical amount of time that some of these projects may take, or are you looking long-form projects that could take months?
Well, actually, they cautioned us in class that sometimes processes can get way too big. So, you may have to take a process that may have multiple steps and break it into smaller projects.
Okay.
Or your team's going to get overwhelmed and you're not going to be successful. The goal is as we look at these project charters, to get them in, if they spend a week on it, whatever it is, the goal would be if they finish charting what that future state's going to look like on Friday, Monday morning becomes implementation. You'll waste no time turning the process and moving it forward. And then you go through the monitoring, the evaluation. We're going to make mistakes. There's no doubt about it. And I've always challenged the team that, be innovative. If it doesn't work, we'll regroup, we'll rethink it, and we'll do it again. But if you don't do anything, you're not going to make the change necessary for us to survive. So encouraging the team to get out there, look at things differently. If it doesn't work, we tweak it, we make it better. And it's going to be continuous improvement, probably about everything we do. And even the latest two projects, whether it's the phone tree or the nuisance process, we'll get down the pike and we're going to realize something's missing. And we also have to recognize that every process has some inherent waste in it, period. We're government, there's going to be certain checks and balances that have to happen whether we like it or not. Managing the waste, looking at a process, rethinking a process, and always looking to strive for excellence is what our goal is.
I like the idea that you hit the ground running. If it finishes on Friday, we start the process on Monday. That's something that almost sounds scary to me, but yet I guess if you've had enough of the team to put enough backing in it, you feel comfortable enough to do something like that.
Yeah, we do. And I think identifying roles and responsibilities are going to be key. Ultimately, at the end of the day, the measurement is the community. And when those complaints start to, I'm not saying that this process is going to eliminate all the nuisance issues we have. What I'm hoping that eliminates is the follow-up calls that our residents make to say, well, I called this in back in September and nothing's been done.
Right.
I'm looking for that greater accountability so that when that call comes in, it's logged, it's sent for inspections. From inspections, it goes to enforcement. And you have this re-inspection then, because we know that if it's a foreclosed property, it's going to have tall grass. We know that once it's abated, once it's declared a nuisance, it's a nuisance for 12 months.
Right.
So let's get a re-inspection date out there so that after we've mowed that grass, 2 weeks later, we're going to send the re-inspection team out again, and we slap them again if it's a violation, so that we don't have to wait for that call to come back in saying that the property has got long grass again. And that's just an example. Most of the complaints we get are tall grass.
And I think that it sounds like you're looking at means to keep everyone informed as well, which I think is something that you hear a lot of people saying, well, I didn't know about, or I didn't hear about this. It sounds like communication
you're right.
as well.
And I think when it comes to the informing part, right now, we operate our nuisance process in a reactionary basis. In other words, if somebody complains, we send it through the process.
Right.
We would like to evolve to the point where we can maybe get proactive. And that re-inspection process is just one tool that will allow us to be proactive. But I think it's also important to manage expectations, and that is we don't have the staff to personally respond to every complaint that comes in. If we can build a process and create that trust that when the resident calls in, they know something's going to be done, that's our goal. But if the expectation is for every call that comes in, there's going to be a return call, we can't manage that process. And I want people to understand that. Trust in the process that we've developed. If it's flawed, then I need to fix it. And if you want to call back in 6 weeks, that's fine. And the goal is that we'll have that database available. You can give me the street address, I can pull it up, and I can tell you exactly where it's at. And there are times, we have situations right now, I'll give you an example. We have a property on Pool Road that's in the process of demolition.
Yes.
And we get calls about every day, why isn't this house down? It's in court, it's tied up in litigation. We've got 2 or 3 big nuisance, zoning matters, property maintenance issues that's tied up in the courts. And unfortunately, those things just take time. But I want to have an answer. If you call me, I want to be able to tell you where it's at in the process, just not tell you, well, I never received your complaint. Or, yes, you complained in September and nothing ever happened to it. That's unacceptable. And that's where we need to get to.
And it sounds that that's where you're getting there. And again, I think also having a proactive community will also help this as well. Not that Colerain has not been, but I think you're starting to see that a little bit more.
Absolutely. I truly believe that we can work together as a community and as a staff and make a process work to address these issues. And that, like I said, that's just one example.
Yeah.
And you can just about think of any process that if you really took the time to map it, study it, and engage all the stakeholders, there's inefficiency. I don't care if you're private sector, public sector, but to be able to have the tools, and that was the takeaway from this Lean Ohio Boot Camp. You know, the state of Ohio invested $2,000 in scholarships for each one of us to go through that. That's something we're going to take serious.
Sure.
That's something we're going to bring back, and it's going to become a fundamental foundational piece that we implement and we use in our workflow.
And the other thing is that, you know, we're talking about projects that you're looking at. We're not talking about bringing it down to the other levels, as we said earlier. So there may be other projects burrowing and bubbling down here to come up to make new changes in Colerain, which is a wonderful thing.
Absolutely.
So let's say we reconvene here back in fall next year, and everyone's taken the camp. What do you expect to see? Are you expecting to see a little more efficiency, or are you expecting to see things that you probably didn't even notice were maybe flawed or not addressed?
Yeah, I think what we'll see is we're going to see a number of projects come through that probably aren't even on my radar right now, things that I'm not even aware that's going on. And what my goal would be is to engage our employees to the point that those projects are happening within, whether it's a firehouse or a department or the entire township, and to set the expectation that I don't want to put a limit. I mean,
Sure.
you know, ideally 4 to 6 projects a year, but if we want to do 20, that's fine. The goal that I have is let's look at it. There's no excuse for an inefficient process any longer. Once the entire leadership team is trained in this, then I'm going to empower them to spread the word within their departments to make this happen. So if something's not working from a process perspective, there's not going to be an excuse.
Right.
I'm not going to utilize this tool as a way to reduce staff or necessarily to add staff, but it is a tool that will provide helpful information to us so that we can recognize maybe we have a process that we just don't have adequate staffing to be able to provide the end result. It would be nice to know that. It's a conversation piece. Doesn't mean we're going to add staff or cut staff, but to be able to understand the process, where our inefficiencies are, where our waste is a benchmark and a tool that we can use to make some decision making.
And make you go forward, so you can understand where to go.
Absolutely.
As well. Well, believe it or not, we've made it to the bottom of the hour, and again, we could have probably gone on to talk about a couple other projects that are going on, but I want to give you the opportunity to just sit back, relax, enjoy the fall. We'll reconvene next year, believe it or not, 2016, with some interesting things coming up, and hopefully we'll have Jenna with you maybe next time as well. But I want to thank you, Mr. Rowan. I want to thank you for joining us as well. I hope that you have found something new and exciting at your own township. That's why we do these programs here. If you'd like to help out or would like to create your own, 825-2429. That's our phone number here. That gets you. We can dial it in, get all the information that you'd like to be your own producer or a volunteer here at Waycross Community Media. I'm Jason Grisgoric, Waycross Community Media's Government Access Coordinator, giving you the opportunity to talk with Colerain Township. Have a great evening. We'll see you next time.